Good, buddy.
I'm good.
Sorry, Ronnie, I'm mute. I was trying to unmute you and you muted at the same time. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good.
Good, man. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. And yourself, sir?
It's interesting times.
It is. It is. My students, they're slowly joining in. So
That's fine. Take your time.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Unfortunately, by video, but I appreciate you giving us an opportunity to speak to you.
And you're at Northwest?
Northeast, sir.
Northeast. Okay.
Yeah, don't put that evil on us.
Well, be careful now. I'm a graduate of Northwest, so
Are you really?
got to know your audience.
Understood.
And this is the high school?
That's correct, sir. I have freshmen to seniors. So typically they'll start sophomore year when they do their focus elective. So for the students that I have, I teach criminal justice. So I start with procedural, history, Bill of Rights, that kind of stuff, give them the foundation. Then as they continue through the course, it drills down more on forensics and the court proceedings, testimony, that kind of stuff.
Sure. And you guys aren't having school, so are these folks that just want kind of volunteer to continue on with this portion of it?
That is correct. So they've given the students several opportunities for continued learning. Excuse me, for continued learning, which the kids can go onto the district website and just look through and cover additional material. But I've tried to take it a step further where I'm continuing with our subject area.
Sure.
So we wouldn't have this opportunity if we were in the classroom. So it affords them an opportunity to meet and be out in the otherwise virtual field trips, be out in the industry and see what it is.
Yeah. You know, that's the interesting dynamic of what we're dealing with now. There's been opportunities to do things differently than we've done them in the past. And some of them have been so productive that we'll do them from now on. And stuff like this, people in government, judges, sometimes it's hard to manipulate their schedule to give them enough time to say go to Northeast.
Sure.
But it's easy enough for me to take a break and meet with folks like this. Now, I'd rather meet with people in person. That's just the kind of guy I am. But sometimes, you know, that this may be the only option, and it accomplishes everybody's goal.
I agree. I've had a fortunate opportunity, not unlike yourself, the willingness for you guys to support us. I'm prior military, so I was able to speak with one of my old commanders. He's currently out at the Pentagon. I have a Zoom tomorrow with a TBI agent. So there's no way I could have ever expected, like you said, for you guys to come down to our school. But allow my students an opportunity to meet and speak to you guys has been really phenomenal.
All right, you got about got everybody online now, or everybody's going to be online?
It looks that way. There'll probably be one or two more that trickle in, but if you want to go ahead and we can get started, that'd be great.
Yeah. So tell me what you want to know.
So I just wanted to kind of speak to you briefly and see what your experience has been in the professional field from the time that you were practicing as an attorney and what led you to being able to sit on the bench and some of the cases that you've dealt with or your personal experience through your profession, best case, worst case, that kind of stuff, and the education and training requirements that you still are, I'm sure, subject to, that you have to continue with learning and so on.
Sure. Well, first, let me give you a little background on myself, because mine's not the traditional path, not even close to the traditional path. I'm an Army brat, so I moved around a lot. Ended up graduated from Northwest. I don't want to hear anybody, any of the students, jeering or anything like that. And then I sat out of college for a year, walked onto the baseball team at Austin Peay, so they got me back into college. I went to Austin Peay for a year, got a scholarship to play in Chattanooga, went there for a year, came back to Austin Peay, hurt myself. And when I hurt myself, I stopped going to school because the reason I was going to school was baseball.
Sure. What position did you play?
Well, at Austin Peay, I played outfield. At Chattanooga State, I was a catcher.
Okay.
But anyway, so I stopped going to school, I went to work for a company, had a major car accident, and when I got done recovering, I started a business. It's a company called D&D Shirt Printers, which is on Fort Campbell Boulevard. Some folks may have seen it, but we provide screen printing shirts and trophies, stuff like that. But any event, I did that started that in '84, and I still own it, but I did that until 1994 when I started law school. And in that interim, I got married, had some kids, and chipped away going at night to Austin Peay, and finally got my degree in public management. And when I got my degree in 1994, I was like, okay, what do I do with this? I got the degree because I wanted to say I was a college graduate. And believe it or not, that's reason enough to get the degree, because it brings with it a certain amount of confidence when you're dealing with people, because you've taken that effort and you demonstrate that you have the ability to work and learn and become educated. So I thought, okay, what do I do with this? And a friend of mine who is now state House member, Curtis Johnson, said he had thought about law school, but decided not to go. And he gave me his LSAT practice book. And it occurred to me that I could use a law degree in my business. And that's why I went to law school, because I thought it would help me with my business. And I got into law school and I liked it. I liked the subject matter. I especially like criminal law and things like that. So long story short, I finished, got my degree, got out, and I bought a building without having my law license. I bought a building and renovated it. Let's talk about faith. I found out, I renovated it, found out I passed the bar, opened my own office. And generally people go to work for other attorneys when they start out for that mentorship. But I'd never worked for anybody ever. And I didn't think I would do well working with other people or taking direction from other people. So I opened my own law firm, and I learned, I learned from the school of hard knocks. I made my share of mistakes, but as long everybody's going to make mistakes, as long as you learn from them, then it's productive. So I took on a partner who was younger than me, but had more experience in the law. And I learned a lot from this guy, a guy named Roger Nell, who's now the public defender, and started practicing law. And I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And then I decided, okay, keep in mind, I'd only been practicing five or 6 years, but I was in my mid 40s. So I was more mature than the average five-year attorney. And I decided that I thought I might make a good judge. And the judge, I've always been of the belief that if somebody's doing a good job, don't run against them, because, you know, what if it ain't broken, why fix it? But in this instance, there was a judge that I didn't care for the way he did his court, how he made it, his decisions. So I ran against him and lost. And it's a lot of hard work running a campaign of any nature. And when I got done, I thought, oh, I'll never do this again. Well, a couple of years later, that judge had an accident and passed away and died. And so in a general sessions court, the county commission appoints a judge. So I put my name in the hat. Thought, you know, I don't have to get 20,000 votes. I just got to get about 11 or 12 votes. Now, the story behind that is I did not get appointed. The person that got appointed was on the county commission. So you can read between the lines. But she got on the bench, and I really did not like her. And working in my favor is neither did the clerks or the lawyers that work with her. So I decided, I talked with my wife, and we made the decision together that I would run again.
Yeah.
This time I was a little bit smarter about it, though, because running a campaign, you think when you go to door, you go to every single door. Well, signs don't vote. And, you know, you go on a political season, you see all these people with signs in their yards.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that doesn't mean they're necessarily voters. That just means they agreed to put somebody's sign in their yard. So my friend Curtis Johnson, again, I talked to him, and he kind of educated me on, you don't go to houses where they don't vote. And you don't just go to registered voters' houses, because they don't always vote. And they have these computer programs, these printouts that show who votes, when they voted, how often they voted, what party they voted for. Now, judges are nonpartisan, or they used to be. When I ran, they were nonpartisan. They are now, and that needs to go away again. But so I would go to neighborhoods where there were, say, 100 houses, and I would only knock on 3 or 4 doors, believe it or not. And it always made me uncomfortable not going to all those doors.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I got 50% of the vote. The incumbent got 33% of the vote, and the third person got the rest of it.
Wow.
So it's sometimes it's not about how hard you work. It's about how smart you work.
Sure.
All right. So I became a judge, and I've been doing this for 10 years. 10 years in September. I do General Sessions Court does misdemeanors, does orders of protection, does juvenile stuff, and does custody stuff where people have never been married. I do 3 days of criminal, and I also have a veterans treatment court, which is a hybrid. And if you guys want to talk about that, we can talk about that in a little bit.
Well, I apologize. You say it was what now?
A veterans treatment court.
Okay.
It's a hybrid. We have a recovery court for people that have problems with drugs and alcohol, and then we have a veterans court, which is similar but different.
Does that work in unison with the court system on Fort Campbell, or is that a
No,
standard?
no, it's a standalone court.
Okay.
We work kind of in cooperation with the command out at Fort Campbell. I brief each time a new CG comes in. I brief him or her and the major unit commanders and their sergeants major. And we have a really good relationship with Fort Campbell, but we are a standalone court.
Understood.
So I hear a fair amount of preliminary hearings. I do very few trials on the merits where I make the decision. I have the orders of protection. I probably shouldn't say this, but I call it Jerry Springer Court, because 98% of the cases that come in are something that you might see on Jerry Springer. About 2% are really serious, and they really are serious. But I have a deputy that she asked when I'm having hearings so she can come in my court and watch. That's how bad it is. But anyway,
that's unfortunate.
It is, but I mean, that's kind of the world we live in. So
it is.
So now, middle of March, we have this COVID-19 thing appear. It appeared before that, but people started taking it serious in the middle of March. And the Supreme Court of Tennessee said, hey, we got to stop doing in-person hearings. You got to put everything out. You got to bump everything down the road except for constitutionally required matters. And that would be people in jail that have to be heard. They have to be heard by a judge within 14 days. And then they added ex parte orders of protection because there's constitutional implications. If you tell somebody they can't go around their family, you know, the wife or their kids or the girlfriend or whatever.
Yes, sir.
Restricts their movements. So okay, we said, okay, how the heck are we going to do that? And we came up with what's called WebEx. It's very similar to Zoom. And Zoom and WebEx I'd never heard of until this happened. But it has been a lifesaver for the court system. We've been able to deal with people in jail, adjudicate their matter, you know, do something with their matter, move it down the road, or make a final decision, and where people's constitutional rights are protected. Now, this coming Monday, we're moving into a new phase where we're going to be able to do some in-person stuff, but it's limited. We're only allowed to have 10 people in a courtroom at a time, other than the court personnel.
So that doesn't include the bailiff and the reporter and
Right.
all that? Okay.
Right, those are all additional folks. So we're going to have a gaggle of people coming into the courtroom, waiting to get into a courtroom. And part of what we've done to try to remedy that is stagger the docket calls. Typically, court starts at 9 or 1:30. So you either come at one of those two times. Now we're staggering it every half hour. But the administrative side of the things is just nuts. Trying to get word out to people when they're supposed to be at court is a major league challenge, and we're working through that right now. We're going to be able to start doing things closer to normal. It's not going to be anywhere normal, but it's going to be closer to normal. And then probably starting in June, the Supreme Court, I anticipate, will reduce the restrictions even more. I don't know that they'll just open the floodgates, but we'll be able to do more progressively. So that's kind of where that's me. That's where I come from. That's what I do. That's where we're at right now. So I guess before anybody goes to sleep, we need to start asking questions.
No, you're good, sir. I assure you they're not asleep. I do want to follow up on something you said, that you didn't take the typical traditional route with your education. Do you feel like that non-traditional path that you took with a year off and being at Austin P and starting your own business and that, do Do you feel that that made you a better rounded individual working in the criminal justice field now, that gave you, like you said, you were a more mature 5-year practicing attorney going in there with a different, being at a different age? How was that to your benefit?
Well, that's a great question. So one thing that attorneys don't get is any experience running a business. So when they come out, they either go to work for somebody and they're doing 80 to 100 hours a week because that's what young attorneys that work for big firms do.
Yes.
Or they're starting their own practice. And some people do that, but they have no idea how to promote themselves. They have no idea how to manage money. They have no idea how to hire a staff. They have no idea to where they should, what kind of building they should get, if they should rent, if they should lease, if they should buy. So I had the advantage of, one, having money to buy a building and to renovate it, or the credit. I didn't pay for cash outright, but I had enough credit build up. Young attorneys don't have any credit, much like
Yes.
everybody else. It's 25 years old. And then I had the benefit of real life experiences and my business background. And there's something to be said for living life for a while. You experience things that you can only know about until you experience them.
Yes.
You may have your theories or your thoughts on how something, the younger you are, the more black and white things are. The older you get, the more gray a lot of things get. There's still things that are black and white, but a lot of things start to get gray.
Sure.
But through repetition and experience, you start developing how you want to respond to different life situations. So I had that benefit. I was lucky enough to where I wasn't full of myself. In other words, I realized that there's always room to learn, and I could learn. Stealing other people's ideas is the best way to do stuff, because they've already figured out by their mistakes and stuff. So if you see something that works well, emulate it.
Certainly.
I don't know why, but I've always put myself around people that are successful. You can hang around people that don't succeed, and you're going to be a person that becomes a person that doesn't succeed. Hang around with people that succeed, just by osmosis, some of that sinks in, and you're going to want to succeed. You're going to see how they succeed and emulate that. So I was always, I don't know why or how, but but for the grace of God, there go I just like being around people that like to win. That seasoning, life experiences, business experience, what put me ahead and set me up to succeed. Now, the flip side of that is not everybody's disciplined enough to go back to school and finish after they've left. I mean, I am an extreme exception to the rule. Most people don't make it that way.
So when you initially started practicing as an attorney, was it strictly criminal, or what type of cases was your primary caseload?
Yeah, when you're a young attorney on your own, you take everything that comes through the door.
Okay.
But the thing about that is you learn really quick about what cases are crap cases, excuse my French, but what cases are crap cases, and to stay away from them. Because somebody may have money and willing to pay you a big fee.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, if they are lousy cases and the client has higher expectations than what is appropriate, you end up spending more time. You don't make as much per hour on those cases because you're chasing your tail.
So would that be more like the civil small claims cases that you're referring to?
Yeah, stuff like that. But you got to pay the rent. You got to pay your staff. You got to pay for the phone. and the advertising. So you got to, I mean, money just doesn't appear. And I think there's a generally a misconception about attorneys and their livelihood, how much they make. We have a lot of attorneys in town for different reasons that, you know, they're lucky to make $30,000 a year, which, you know, for some people may sound like a lot of money, but for somebody that's got an advanced degree,
that's not really an equivalent to the level of education.
No, I mean, doctors, they go in and right off the bat, they're making a decent salary, you know.
Certainly.
Dentists, you know, for professionals, lawyers generally don't make as much money as people think they do. Now, there's a lot of attorneys that make a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but that's after years of work, a certain amount of luck, and picking the right path in the law profession. And generally that's like personal injuries and stuff like that. I never was interested in personal injuries, even though that was a way to down the road make a lot of money.
Yes.
I wasn't doing it. It wasn't about making money for me. It was about enjoying what I do. And criminal law ended up being what I enjoyed most. Now, let me just give you something unsolicited. A lot of people think that the way you measure a good criminal defense attorney is by how many people they get off their charges. And that's not the job of a criminal defense attorney. The job of a criminal defense attorney is to protect their clients' constitutional rights. And that means making sure that the state, the government, crossed their T's and dotted their I's, that they did what they arrested and found out what this guy or woman, man or woman were doing the way the law and the Constitution require. You know, you can't just bust into a person's house because you think that they're selling drugs. You got to develop probable cause, and you got to get a judge to approve it. You know, you got to follow the law. Otherwise, you know, law enforcement is no better than the criminals.
For sure.
So anyway, what else you got?
So what has been the biggest shift from the time that you started as an attorney to what you see in your courtroom now, as far as the severity of crimes or with juvenile offenders? What have you noticed as a current trend that you see more frequently than when you first started?
The biggest, most alarming thing that I see is how many juveniles not only breaking the law, because that's increased, but that are armed. In other words, how many weapons are in the hands? I mean, guns and rifles and assault rifles are in the hands of 15, 16, and 17-year-old kids. It's alarming. And also how social media feeds this dynamic.
So
because
is that
they're on social media, and it's like a badge of honor.
So you feel that's the driving force? It doesn't have to do with gun laws and accessibility of the guns, but how social media is driving that type of culture for juveniles?
So weapons are always going to be available, no matter what the law is, no matter how much you restrict the ability to legally possess a weapon. Weapons are always going to be available. You know, there's an old adage: if you criminalize possession of weapons, only the criminals will have the weapons.
True story.
Merit to that. And I'm not a gun advocate per se, but I do believe that people have the right constitutionally to own weapons. The Constitution doesn't prohibit restrictions or checks and balances, and I think those are appropriate, but people should have the right and do have the right to possess and own weapons. The problem is these young, primarily men, find ways of getting weapons, stealing them a lot of times. And then that's their badge of honor.
Yes, sir.
It's gang activity, but there's also a cultural thing with this, again, with social media. And I think the social media helps. Social media is a great thing, but it's also, it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of stuff out there that I can't believe that people put out there, and then they're surprised when everybody knows about it. But that's just the nature. It's the nature of the media.
Sure, I want to jump in here real quick. I know we only have a few minutes left. I do, as long as you're agreeable to it, I do want to open it up to the students that are on.
I would like that.
Okay. Donovan, I've already unmuted you. Rodney, if you could unmute yourself. If you guys would like to ask the judge any questions, this is certainly a great opportunity. Rodney, you still on there, buddy? Donovan.
Okay, so you already answered.
See, I did put somebody asleep.
Oh, no, absolutely not, sir. You're good.
No, go ahead, Donovan.
You already had most of the questions that I had planned, but one question that I did have is, how is coronavirus affecting your job?
I'm sorry, you broke up. How is coronavirus what?
Affecting your job?
Okay, that's a great question. While we have put things off considerably, all we're doing is jail things and the constitutional things that I mentioned earlier. Every day, normally we have a routine, and the things that we're doing, we've done every day for me for 10 years. Now we're having to reinvent the wheel, and every day we're having to make stuff up as we go. And that's really taxing. Now, the flip side of that is I'm working 2 days a week. The other judges are working 1 day a week until next week, and then we go back to a quasi-regular schedule. But yeah, that's the most challenging thing, is we're having to make up things as we go, and every time we change something, then somebody says, well, what about this? And we're having to change it again. So it's very challenging. It's like you going to a new school. Anybody out there Army brats?
We've got a few on here, sir.
Yeah, well, it's like going to a new school and having to make new friends and having to learn where your classes are, and it's like going to a new school every day. So you never quite get comfortable. And so I guess that's the best way for me to describe what it's like now.
Okay. Rodney, you have any questions?
How you doing, Judge Goble?
I'm good.
I don't know if you remember me, but you came and sat in on a couple of not interviews, but like at the Kennedy Law Firm. I was the intern there.
Sure.
But I guess he did kind of take my question, but I mean, it's whatever. I could come up with something. So you just said it was being difficult. I know y'all looking at the Constitution and stuff, but how do you see the sessions changing? Like, what do you think is gonna happen between in the actual courtroom when this is somewhat not done, but like you said, y'all going back next week. So how do you see it changing up? All
right. So for first appearances, typically we set first appearances at 10:30 every day. And first appearances, most people call those arraignments. It's the first time they come to court. We set them at 10:30 now, and the judge tells them what they're charged with, what the penalty is, and tells them to come back with an attorney. Now, for the time being, everybody for a first appearance is just coming to the clerk's window, picking up a packet that we do, they're being given a new court date and coming back on that court date. So they don't have an interaction with the court the first time that they're supposed to be in court. Then we're taking announcements. We're not doing any trials right now. If the state and the defense attorney have come up with an agreement, whether it's to plead guilty, whether it's to dismiss it, whether it's to set it off 6 months to be dismissed. Between 8:30 and 9:30 every day, we're taking announcements. If the state and the defense attorney don't agree, we're setting it out for a trial sometime after June 15th, hoping that by June 15th, we'll be able to open things up back to what's normal. The rest of the day, we're doing docket calls where people come in. Normally, they would come in at either 9 o'clock or 1:30. We're setting them every half hour now, 15 people every half hour, and they're coming in. So that's the new normal until we get back to regular normal.
So another thing is that, so what about our, I think isn't our Sixth Amendment, the speedy right to a speedy trial? So how does that is that in effect right now, or like?
Sure, that never goes away. If you're in jail, like I talked about, you have to be heard within 14 days. If you're not in jail, you have the right to be heard within 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
But most people don't invoke that right because they want time to be able to hire an attorney. Attorneys, the average cost for a general sessions court for most attorneys somewhere between $500 and $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a good portion of the people that are getting in trouble don't have that kind of spare change hanging around, so they've got to come up with the money.
Right.
And we give them 60 to 90 days to do that. If somebody is working and they can't go back to work until the criminal charge is done, generally that's somebody that wants their case heard within 30 days. Or say they're in the Army and they're on orders to go somewhere else, that may be an instance where they want to be heard within 30 days. But otherwise, most people aren't really chomping at the bit to get heard,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they're facing jail time or probation or having to pay court costs. They just as soon put it off as long as they can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. And I hate to interrupt, but Your Honor, we've got just under a minute left. So any last minute thoughts, or if you want to share just very quickly, what is the most memorable case you've ever had in your courtroom? Something like that in closing.
Sure. All right. So about 6 months ago, I was in juvenile court, and I had a person that had submitted a motion to waive their cost. He came in and he said, "Judge, when I was a juvenile," this kid was 22-ish at the time. He said, when I was in your court, I left through that door," and he pointed to the side door, which is where the people go to detention from. He said, "But had you not done that, I wouldn't be where I am today."
Wow.
He had just graduated from college and been accepted to law school. So I still get emotional about that, talking about it today, but I broke down and boo-hooed when he told me about that.
I can imagine so.
So he's in law school, and next week he starts interning for me for the summer.
That's awesome.
It is, and
That's awesome. What a reward.
Yeah. Well, as a judge, though, you rarely get to see these stories. They just don't. They move on with their lives.
Yeah.
So it was really meaningful for me to get to see this guy again.
That's great.
That's my story.
That's awesome, sir. Your Honor, I just want to thank you again. I greatly appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure my students will enjoy getting to see this, because this is something that I do share on the classroom for the ones that weren't able to attend. So just thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it.